Hi, my name's Kate Leto, and I'm an executive coach, and I work with product leaders and executives of at organizations all over the world. And I'm here today to talk to you about emotional intelligence and why I really feel that it's the missing skill in your product stack. Just to give you a little bit of context as to where all this is coming from. So, based on my 25 years plus experience in and around product management, I've kind of come to a point where when I talk about product management with my clients, I always describe it as a practice, kind of like how a doctor practices medicine and a lawyer practices law. In my mind, and based on my experience, we in product management have this vast virtual toolbox of methodologies and frameworks and tools, and we use it to try to solve some really complex problems. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it sure takes a lot of practice. And within our product practice, I view it as having two distinct but connected skill sets. One is our technical skills, which is what we do. And the second is our human skills, which is how we do the work. So just a little more context about what I mean by technical skills and human skills. So technical skills, the work that we do every day, we talk about roadmaps and put those together. We talk a lot about OKRs for our organizations and our goals and our KPIs. There's a lot of conversation that we have around our MVPs and what those might be like, how to build a great roadmap or how to build a great prototype, how to actually find out more about what our customers think through testing with A/B testing and multivariate testing. All these things are hugely important and a big part of the foundation of what our product practice is all about and what we do. So they're great. They're foundational. They're important to us. However, they're not everything. There's also how we do the work and the human skills. And this is where I really think emotional intelligence comes in. Skills like being able to coach and mentor, skills like having conflict management and resolution capabilities, teamwork, leadership skills, emotional self-awareness, empathy. All of these are crucial skills that we bring into the way that we work every day. And seeing that this is a talk about emotional intelligence and product management, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with a definition on emotional intelligence. So this is coming from the Institute of Health and Human Potential. And they say that emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, and recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of those around us. And you may be familiar, if you're familiar with emotional intelligence, you may be familiar with a guy named Daniel Goleman, who is a psychologist, a best-selling author. He wrote a book all about emotional intelligence in 1995 that really popularized the concept. And in that book, he argued that our EQ, which is our emotional quotient or our measurement of emotions, is actually more important than our IQ in achieving success, be it personally or professionally. And over the last few decades, he's really dug more into emotional intelligence and evolved the definition. And he and his colleagues have come up with the concept that there's really four components of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And within those components are all the different skills that I had just mentioned on the previous slide about our human skills and how we do our work: emotional self-awareness, empathy, organizational awareness, adaptability, positive outlook, the ability to and skill to influence, to deal with conflict. All of these things are skills of emotional intelligence. And when you think about it, our technical skills and our human skills, our emotional intelligence are already intertwined. If you want to build a roadmap and get that out there, it's not just about the technique. It's not just about the software you're going to use or how you're going to prioritize. It's having the emotional intelligence to get that done. It's having the self-awareness to be able to raise your hand and say, okay, maybe the thing that I'm really pushing for here on the roadmap is out of my own best interest, not the best interest of my team or my organization. It's also having things like influencing skills to be able to bring those challenging stakeholders and the rest of your team with you on what you feel the vision of the roadmap is. It's even having conflict resolution skills, because we always know there's going to be some kind of tension or conflict when it comes to putting together a roadmap. Also, when it comes to hiring, I wrote a book called Hiring Product Managers, and it's not about the technical side. It's not going to give you the 5 steps or frameworks to go out and hire people, but it does address the emotional intelligence that's involved in how we approach hiring, right? Because everything from how we write a job description to the interview questions that we ask, to how we consider the candidate's performance in the interview, all is impacted by our emotional intelligence and our candidate's emotional intelligence. So the cool thing is that much like the ability to learn new techniques or new frameworks, we do have the ability to also build our emotional intelligence. It takes a bit longer. It's a bigger challenge. It takes a lot of discipline, but it is possible. And if you are interested in doing that, I highly recommend starting with self-awareness and building that as a skill. Self-awareness in many ways is a foundational skill in emotional intelligence. From that, once we start to build that and grow that, we have easier access to things like empathy and to being inspirational leaders and to being good teammates and to being good coaches and mentors. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what self-awareness is. So I want to start at that point. And this definition that I'm going to share with you is from Tasha Eurich, who is an organizational psychologist, who is a researcher and obviously a best-selling author as well. And within her book, Insight, she talks about self-awareness as having two components. So the first is internal self-awareness, which is the ability to see ourselves clearly. I think we often associate that aspect of self-awareness when we think about it. It's seeing ourselves clearly, knowing ourselves. There's also external self-awareness, which is how others see us and how we fit into the world around us. I think that component to self-awareness is something that we may not be as familiar with. And in her book, Eurich recommends that we actually work on both of these in tandem. We need to have a balanced level of internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. And when we have that, it really shows up in our work as product people every day. It's going to show up in how we make decisions because we're going to understand where our motivations come from. It's going to show up in your overall approach to work because you're going to know your superpowers and your kryptonite, and you're going to know how to work with both. It's going to show up with how you lead because you're going to be able to be in a place where you can hold your convictions as a leader, but also have the ability to stay humble and curious. And it's going to show up in how you learn because you'll be taking responsibility for your actions. You're going to build that muscle of being able to look back, to identify those things you wish you'd done differently and learn to move forward with them and try it differently next time around. So overall, lots of good things comes from self-awareness, and it can really help us with how we do our work as product people. So what I want to talk about next is how you can start to build your own self-awareness and start to build it in a very simple, pragmatic way and build it into kind of a daily routine. And I call this a self-awareness trilogy. It's knowing thyself, accepting thyself, and improve thyself. So we're going to start with know thyself. A very simple exercise that you can do every day to start to get yourself better and build that is through daily self-reflection. So when I was doing research on my book, I found this interesting study that said through daily self-reflection, we can increase our performance by up to 23%. And I'm not talking about huge investments of time. I'm talking about maybe 5-10 minutes in the morning, 5-10 minutes in the evening, if that works better for you, to grab a piece of paper and a pen and write down the responses to a few open-ended questions. And I do encourage you to write them down with paper and pen because our brain kind of works differently when we do that. But ask yourself some simple questions and respond to those. In the morning, ask, what do I want to accomplish today? What am I worried about today? In the evening, respond to the questions like, what worked well today? What do I want to do differently tomorrow? What am I most grateful for today? Bringing gratitude into self-reflection is hugely powerful. Now, you may notice that none of these questions start with why. When you're doing self-reflection, it's really important to take a step back from why questions. Why? Well, if we knew why we did something or why we didn't do something, we probably wouldn't have done it that way in the first place. And trying to challenge ourselves with a why question so soon after something happened can kind of send our brains down a negative cycle and create negative self-talk and a negative storyline that we have a hard time breaking away from. So with daily self-reflection, focus on your why questions and do that in the morning, in the evening, even on your commute, if you're back commuting to work, whenever works for you. Just find a time that does work for you. And what we're going to do then is through daily self-reflections, you're going to be able to identify some key insights over time. And I want you to hold on to those because we're going to put them to work in just a minute. Before that, though, we're going to move on to the second part of the trilogy, which is I accept thyself. And you can do that through identifying and accepting your blind spots. Now, it's really interesting because I feel like in the conversations that I have with clients, it's not always a challenge in getting feedback to help you identify your blind spots. But what is a challenge is actually accepting them as blind spots and accepting that feedback. There's another great book that I want to point out. It's by another executive coach named Marshall Goldsmith. And he wrote a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And he points out that often if we receive feedback about blind spots that just doesn't align with our self-view or view of ourselves and how we fit into the world around us, then we're not going to accept it, right? We're just going to disregard it. So he says, in order to actually accept your blind spots, you need to ask the right people, ask the right questions, interpret the answers properly, and then you can accept the response as accurate. We don't have time to get into all of that today, but I'm going to focus and introduce a couple of practices that you can try to ask the right people. And the first is trusted critic, is a practice that you could try out on your own. So the idea here is you are actually picking the people that you want to get this feedback from, okay? And this group of people, small group of people could be 3 or 4 people who you feel really have your best interests at heart, but they're not going to sugarcoat any feedback they give you. They're going to tell you the truth, okay? Could be a little bit of tough love, and you're going to seek them out. So the idea is you're going to hopefully start to accept what they're saying as true because you've identified the people that you want to get the information from. They are people you trust, but you know they're also people that are going to be honest and fair with you. So what you're going to ask your trusted critics to do is to drop a list of what they see are your strengths and weaknesses. And then you're going to do the same for yourself. Okay. So we're going to have 2 lists of strengths and weaknesses, and you're going to come together and you're going to compare. And most likely what you're going to find is a gap, because this is actually our internal self-awareness and our external self-awareness coming up together in one simple practice, right? The wider the gap between their list and your list means the more work you have to do. But that's totally cool because, again, you're going to grab the insights and high-level learnings from that exercise, and you're going to hold on to them for a minute because we're going to put them to work. But in the meantime, I want to talk about one other thing that you could try to accept the feedback as true and identifying the right people, because you're going to be the person that's doing this work. You're going to become kind of self-anthropologist and pick an hour, a day, a week, whatever it is. And you're going to sit back and you're going to observe and you're going to capture all the casual comments that are said about you. You know, you're late, Kate. That's a great idea, Kate. You already said that, Kate. Dinner was great, Kate. All of these things. At the end of your observation period, you're going to look at the patterns. And maybe you're going to see some things that surprise you. Maybe you'll see a few comments about how you've interrupted in meetings and you didn't realize you were doing that. Or maybe that you're not speaking up in meetings and you weren't aware of that as well. So we're going to take this data and insights that we're getting from self-reflection and from our trusted critics and from observational feedback, and we're going to put them to work. And the last part of the trilogy, which is improve thyself. And we're going to do that by doing what product people do best, which is building experiments. This experiment loop is kind of similar to build, measure, learn, which I'm sure a lot of you know about, but it's learn, act, and adapt. And all you're going to do is you're going to take those insights from these different practices and you're going to write it down and identify one of them and simply capture that and as something that you've discovered you want to work on and you want to change. So high level, what do you want to change? Second thing in terms of act, what's one small action you can take for the next week, the next 2 weeks to try to change that behavior, try to change whatever it is that you're not comfortable with. And then you're going to check in, right, at the end of your experiment period, and you're going to adapt. What do you want to try next? How do you want to continue to grow and change? So what you're building here is really a self-awareness loop. And you're starting this whole process of continuous personal discovery. And I want to encourage, when you get to this point, this is the hardest part. This is really where the rubber hits the road. And it's really helpful to have somebody to work with you on this, or just have somebody to kind of hold you accountable on it as well. Could be a peer coach, could be a friend at work, could be a partner, could be a boss, could be an external coach. But get some help with this, because this part is improving thyself as I said, rubber hits the road. It's hard to do on your own, but it is possible and it is feasible if you're really into it and you're ready to take the energy and dedication and move into it. So I've given you a very high level look at emotional intelligence and product management and self-awareness and how you can start to build that on your own. If you'd like to find out more, if there's any way I can help, I hope you'll keep in touch. Check out my website, find me on Twitter, sign up to my newsletter, drop me a line. Thank you very much.